What would you do if your father was dying, his leg amputated, doctors whispering about sepsis, and the clock ticking down to a possible death, and you still refuse to call? Not out of ignorance, not out of distance, but out of sheer, deliberate silence. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Now imagine you're one of the most famous women in the world. A duchess, a mother, a humanitarian. A woman with the world's cameras trained on every movement, and you still say nothing. This isn't fiction. This is the life or death drama unfolding right now between Meghan Markle and her estranged father, Thomas Markle, 81 years old, recovering from emergency surgery in a hospital in Cebu, Philippines. The leg is gone. The infection is spreading. The pain is unspeakable. And through it all, no call, no message, not a word from Meghan. But here's the real twist. Prince Harry, her husband, has had enough. Behind palace gates and Montecito mansions, a brutal ultimatum is said to have been delivered, one that could split their marriage wide open. According to multiple whispers from insiders and former staff, Harry allegedly told Meghan, "Call him now, or I will. And this time, I'm not protecting you." Is it too little, too late? Or is this the moment that forces the Duchess of Sussex to confront the very thing she spent years running from? Welcome to a story of silence, stubbornness, and a ticking clock. A family at war, a man's last days, and a decision that could destroy everything. Because this time, it's not the tabloids telling the tale. It's the hospital reports. It's the surgeon's hands. It's the blackened flesh of a dying father. And it's a husband who may no longer be willing to keep the peace. But let's rewind. Because to understand why Meghan Markle has remained so cold, even as her father loses a limb, you have to understand how this all began. How does a wedding turn into a war? How does a daughter become a ghost? And why, after all these years, has Prince Harry finally turned around and said, "Enough"? To the public, Meghan Markle is a woman of compassion. She speaks about kindness, empowerment, unity. She wears the badge of feminism. She lights candles for injustice. She writes messages on bananas for the homeless. And yet, her father? Her own flesh and blood? She's written him off like a press release gone stale. Why? In 2018, the world watched a real-life fairy tale unfold. The American actress, the British prince, the wedding bells, the tiara, the royal veil. And somewhere in the Philippines, Thomas Markle sat alone. Not in a church pew, not walking his daughter down the aisle, but recovering from heart surgery, heartbroken, and watching from a screen. The man who once took his little girl to school, who paid her tuition, who supported her dreams of stardom, was suddenly branded as a liability, a threat, a man whose only crime, it seemed, was being unpolished and untrained in the merciless world of global media. He staged paparazzi photos. Yes, a foolish decision, born from desperation and pride. But unforgivable? For a lifetime? For Meghan, apparently, yes. And so began the silence. 5 years. No contact. No phone call. No meeting with the grandchildren. Not a single photo of Thomas Markle with Archie or Lilibet. A man erased. But now, reality is knocking at Meghan's door. And it's dressed in hospital scrubs. Because Thomas Markle didn't just stub a toe or twist an ankle. He suffered a massive, sudden deterioration. A blood clot. A blue foot. A spreading infection. His leg turned black. Flesh dying. No circulation. The hospital made a call. Not to Meghan, but to his son, Thomas Jr. He was the one who rushed to his side. He was the one who listened when the doctor said, "We have no choice. We have to amputate." He was the one who stood in the hallway, pacing for 3 hours while his father's leg was removed. He was the one who begged Meghan through the press, "Call him, before it's too late." But still, she didn't. And that's when Prince Harry stepped in. Now, here's where things take a dramatic turn. Because sources close to the couple suggest that this hospital crisis didn't just stir emotion in Harry, it ignited fury. A fury rooted in guilt, love, and a slowly eroding sense of patience. According to one insider, Harry confronted Meghan behind closed doors. A screaming match. Accusations. Heartbreak. "He's your father," he allegedly said. "He's dying. And if you won't do the right thing, then I will." And that's where the threat came in. Not a violent threat. Not an ultimatum about divorce. But something potentially more damaging. Harry, it said, threatened to take the children, to fly to the Philippines himself, to allow Thomas Markle to finally meet his grandchildren over Meghan's objections. A move that would shatter the image of unity they've tried so hard to sell in Montecito. Because make no mistake, this isn't just a family issue. This is a royal issue, a PR issue, a Netflix issue, a brand issue, and above all, a humanity issue. Thomas Markle has lived a life of chaos. He's suffered a stroke, heart attacks, earthquakes, public ridicule, a global disowning. But through it all, one thing has remained painfully clear. He still loves his daughter. In January, during a rare interview, he said softly, "I will always love her. I just don't like some of the things she's done." It's that kind of love, the stubborn, unconditional, heartbreaking kind, that makes this story even harder to watch. Because love, no matter how tarnished, doesn't always die when legs do. And yet, with his condition worsening and talk of possible further amputations or deadly infection like sepsis or gangrene, the window is closing. Every hour that passes without a call, without a message, without even a whisper from Meghan, speaks louder than any press release ever could. She's choosing silence. And Harry? He may be choosing something else. Some say he's had enough, that he's tired of the rigid narrative, that he's questioning everything. Her media strategies, her morality, even their shared values. One source close to the palace said, "He's seeing it differently now. This isn't about the press. This is about humanity." And that's the heartbreak. Because as much as Meghan claims to be a victim of tabloid cruelty, in this moment, it's not the press she's hurting. It's her own father. And while the world debates her right to privacy, Thomas Markle is lying in a foreign hospital, legless, alone, and still, defending the daughter who hasn't called. Why? That's the question that haunts this entire story. Is Meghan protecting her peace? Or protecting her image? Is this self-care? Or cold-hearted cruelty? And how far is Harry willing to go to do what she wants? Because, according to some insiders, he's already made plans. Quiet, discreet arrangements. A chartered flight. A private nurse. A new security team. Is it real? Or just a threat to shake Meghan out of her trance? We may find out soon. Because one thing is certain, this situation can't go on much longer. Thomas Markle's doctors say the next 48 hours are critical. If the infection spreads to his thigh, he may lose the entire leg, or worse. The press is circling. The family is pleading. The children have never even seen their grandfather. And Prince Harry is done waiting. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What does it take for a daughter to pick up the phone? A headline? A hospital report? A limb? For Thomas Markle, it took all three, and still silence. The moment that changed everything didn't arrive with fanfare. It came in a shadow, a dark bruise, a faint discoloration on the bottom of his foot. Something small, easy to ignore, until it wasn't. It started, as many tragedies do, with something deceptively minor. Thomas Markle noticed his foot was tingling. Not painful, just strange. He described it as a pins and needles sensation. The kind you get when your foot falls asleep. Except this didn't go away. In fact, by the time he tried standing, his foot was already turning a disturbing shade of blue. He didn't panic. Not at first. This was a man who had survived 2 heart attacks, a near-fatal stroke, and even the psychological earthquake of losing his daughter to fame and fury. A numb foot? He thought it could wait. It couldn't. Within hours, the discoloration deepened. The tingling turned to stabbing pain. The skin took on a charcoal hue. Then came the smell, faint, sickly sweet, and unmistakably wrong. Gangrene. Blood flow had been compromised. The tissue was dying. The flesh was rotting. His son, Thomas Markle Jr., immediately sprang into action. He rushed his father to a small local clinic in Rosales, Philippines. The doctors were quick to scan, examine, and assess. But their faces told the story before their mouths did. This wasn't going to be fixed with a pill or a bandage. This was life or death. The local hospital did what they could, but the situation had already escalated beyond their capabilities. He needed more advanced care, and fast. An emergency ambulance transfer was arranged. Thomas Jr. rode beside his father as they were rushed to a larger medical center in Cebu, 6 hours away. Imagine that ride. Your father in the back, moaning in pain. His foot turning black. His legs swelling. His temperature rising. Every bump in the road a fresh burst of agony. Every mile a ticking clock. And looming above it all, the awareness that somewhere, thousands of miles away, his daughter, Meghan Markle, was completely unaware, or worse, completely uninterested. By the time they reached the larger hospital, it was too late for minor interventions. The verdict was in. Amputation. 3 hours of surgery. A clean cut below the knee. A race against time to prevent the infection from spreading further. Let that sink in. A man lost part of his body. And the only daughter he ever raised, protected, and financially supported didn't even send a message. Thomas Jr. later told Mail Online, there was no option. It was either, we have to operate now and remove the leg, or he may die. This wasn't drama. This wasn't tabloid hysteria. This was medical fact. The tissue was necrotic. The infection threatened to breach into the bloodstream. Sepsis was a looming danger. The doctors were blunt. This was not just about saving a leg. This was about saving a life. But for Meghan Markle, none of that seemed to matter. Not yet. And for Thomas, the physical agony was only one layer of the pain. Because while the doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize his condition, his mind drifted elsewhere. To his daughter. To the silence. To the unanswered letters. To the grandchildren he's never met. To the wedding he watched alone on a hospital monitor. He reportedly whispered her name more than once. The nurses heard it. Meghan. Over and over. Meghan, what does that feel like? To lose your leg and still hope for a phone call from the very person who cut you off? Can the love of a parent really survive that kind of abandonment? Apparently, yes. Because even as he faced the very real possibility of losing more of his left leg due to a clot in his upper thigh, Thomas didn't lash out. He didn't issue a blistering statement. He didn't beg the press to shame her. He just asked, quietly, gently, for a moment. A call. A goodbye, if nothing else. It didn't come. And yet, the media began to swarm. The moment news of the amputation broke, it exploded across every corner of the internet. Headlines blazed. Comment sections fumed. Debates raged. How could Meghan not respond? How could she, a mother herself, ignore a father who was literally disintegrating? And then came the comparisons. People dredged up old interviews where Meghan praised Harry's love for his late mother, Diana. They reposted her own words about healing family trauma. They clipped footage from her Oprah interview, when tears streamed down her face as she spoke about her father's betrayal. But now, the roles had reversed. Because Meghan wasn't the one betrayed anymore. She was the betrayer. And people were noticing. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Social media turned feral. TikTok flooded with "Where's Meghan?" memes. Reddit threads accused her of moral hypocrisy. Even normally sympathetic voices in the U.S. media began to turn, their tone shifting from gentle admiration to uneasy criticism. And somewhere in Montecito, Harry was watching. Sources close to the Sussexes say this was the moment it hit him. The wall of silence had cracked. Not because of palace pressure. Not because of tabloid attacks. But because of this, a leg. A real, flesh-and-bone reminder that people die. That wounds fester. That time runs out. And Meghan? She wasn't budging. According to one insider, Harry was visibly shaken when he read the medical report. The details were graphic. Words like necrosis, sepsis, and below-the-knee amputation leapt off the page. This wasn't some remote family squabble. This was mortality in motion. And Harry, for all his anger at the Markles over the years, still understood one fundamental truth. A man was dying. He reportedly confronted Meghan that night. "You need to call him," he said, voice trembling. Her reply? A stare. Silence. Then, allegedly, no. Why? Why is the silence so absolute? That's the riddle that even Harry couldn't solve. Some say Meghan views any contact with her father as a gateway to further manipulation, that she believes any outreach will be used against her. Others say the pain runs deeper, that Meghan feels truly abandoned, betrayed by a man who courted the press just days before her royal wedding. But now it's not about paparazzi. It's not about tabloids. It's about a man in a hospital bed, missing a leg, whispering the name of a daughter who's pretending he doesn't exist. And that contradiction is beginning to break Harry. Witnesses describe him pacing the halls of their Montecito home, unable to sleep, checking his phone for updates from the Philippines. Some even claim he's reached out to Thomas Jr. Covertly, secretly, trying to get information, to understand how bad things really are. And Meghan? Still silent. But the longer the silence stretches, the more volatile the situation becomes. Because Harry is no longer playing the obedient husband, the protector, the brand co-pilot. He's asking hard questions now, and he's not liking the answers. The surgery was over. The leg was gone. But the real damage, the emotional kind, was just beginning. Because as the nurses cleaned Thomas's bandages and adjusted his foredrip, they handed him a phone. No missed calls, no voicemail, no text, just more silence. And then, someone else walked into the hospital. But it wasn't Meghan. It wasn't Harry. And what they brought with them would ignite a media explosion that even the Sussexes couldn't stop. What kind of silence is louder than screaming? The kind that comes from a daughter who refuses to lift a phone while her father lies in a hospital bed, minus a leg, hooked to machines, drifting in and out of pain so heavy it shakes the room. The kind that isn't accidental or delayed or complicated. The kind that is deliberate. And that is exactly the silence Meghan Markle kept. Even as headlines exploded. Even as doctors warned of sepsis. Even as her father's remaining leg-wrist collapse. Even as Harry begged her to reconsider. She didn't budge. But why? Why does Meghan Markle, global humanitarian, advocate for compassion, champion of mental health, maintain such a cold, impenetrable wall against her own father? That is the question everyone began asking the moment Thomas Markle's amputation story went public. And the answers? They're messy, contradictory, raw, and emotionally explosive. Let's go back. Because to understand Meghan's refusal to reach out now, in a moment of true crisis, you must understand the resentment she's been dragging behind her like a dead weight since 2018. The wedding that changed it all. Her father wasn't there. Her father didn't walk her down the aisle. Her father didn't hold her hand as she stepped into global royalty. Instead, he was in a hospital, recovering from emergency heart surgery, humiliated by the paparazzi scandal he'd fallen into just days earlier. The fallout was catastrophic. Meghan felt betrayed. Thomas felt cornered. And the British tabloids? They feasted. This is where the first brick in the wall was laid. Thomas, in a moment of misguided pride and naive hope, staged photos with paparazzi to appear healthier, more dignified, more fatherly before the wedding. He wanted to look worthy in front of the world. He wanted Meghan to be proud. But when the ruse was exposed, Meghan felt humiliated. She felt used. She felt manipulated. And so began the freeze-out. But here's the contradiction that still haunts the public discourse. How do you freeze out the man who raised you, supported you, funded your education, paid your acting classes, and carried your childhood dreams on his back? How do you erase a father? How do you cut him out of your life entirely, as if he never existed? People fall out with their parents every day. But most don't go years, without a single word. Most don't marry, have children, build new lives across the world, and still refuse to reconnect, even when death circles overhead. And that is exactly what Meghan is doing now. But the strange twist is this. While Meghan has spent years defending her decision to distance herself, claiming trauma and betrayal, she's also built a public image around compassion. She speaks about reconciliation, healing, forgiveness. She's written about the pain of family wounds. She's cried on camera about generational trauma and the need to break cycles. And yet, she's doing none of that now. That contradiction is what fueled the firestorm surrounding her silence. Because while the world was digesting the shocking news of Thomas's amputation, they were also watching Meghan launch new brands, appear in sleek photo shoots, sign multi-million-dollar deals, and speak about empathy. Empathy for strangers. Empathy for survivors. Empathy for causes. But not empathy for her father. Not even when he whispered her name through tears. Not even when doctors warned he could die within days. Not even when a clot in his thigh threatened to take the rest of his leg. Not even now. But here's where the story takes a darker, more revealing turn. Because while Meghan's silence seemed cold on the surface, what was happening behind the scenes was even colder. According to a former aide, the Sussex PR team was monitoring reactions, headlines, sentiment analytics, social media trends, calculating how Meghan should position herself in response. Not emotionally, not morally, strategically. The question wasn't, should I call my dad? The question was, what do we say if people turn against me? Let that sink in. This wasn't about a father. It was about optics. And if that seems harsh, consider this. The same day the news of the amputation broke, Meghan's team reportedly held a scheduled brand meeting for her lifestyle project. Not a crisis meeting, not a family meeting, a branding meeting. While Thomas's son was pacing the ICU hallway, Meghan was allegedly reviewing packaging designs. Does that make her a villain? A monster? Not necessarily. People cope in strange ways. Trauma twists logic. Walls built from pain don't crumble easily. But here's the emotional gut punch. Even people in Meghan's own circle were shocked she didn't reach out. One friend reportedly said, "Even if you never speak again, you call a dying parent. It's what humans do." Yet Meghan didn't. And each hour she stayed silent made Harry angrier. Because Harry, who has spent years fighting for his wife's emotional safety, now saw a situation where the pain was coming from her, not towards her. He started questioning. He started pushing. He started demanding answers she didn't want to give. According to one insider, Meghan's response was icy. "He's not my family anymore." Think about the weight of that. Not, "He hurt me." Not, "I'm not ready." Not, "I don't know what to say." But, "He's not my family." That level of finality. That level of detachment. That level of coldness. Even Harry, sources say, was taken aback. And then came the emotional dagger, because Meghan reportedly added, "He chose the press over me." But did he? Did Thomas Markle choose the press? Or did he stumble into their trap, overwhelmed, outmatched, and manipulated? Is it betrayal when someone makes a mistake in fear and loneliness? Or is it simply human? That's the painful complexity of this tragedy. Because while Meghan clings to her anger, Thomas still clings to his love for her. He called her "my little flower." He kept drawings she made as a child. He framed her first TV roles. He paid for her college. He bragged about her success to strangers. Was he perfect? No. But parents don't have to be perfect for their children to forgive them. And as the silence deepened, the world began to witness something even more heartbreaking. Meghan's public image, carefully curated for years, began to crack. People noticed the contradiction. They noticed the coldness. They noticed the rigidity. And suddenly, something shifted. For the first time since the Oprah interview, public sentiment wasn't automatically in Meghan's favor. For the first time, she looked less like the wounded victim and more like someone capable of inflicting wounds. But the real shock wasn't the public backlash. It wasn't the headlines. It wasn't the outrage. It wasn't even Harry's growing frustration. The real shock came from who walked into the hospital in Cebu and what they brought with them. Because that visitor, unexpected, uninvited, and emotionally charged, came with information Meghan never wanted released. Information that could rip open the past. Information that could force the world to rethink everything. Information that Meghan has been trying to bury for years. And Harry? He didn't see it coming. No one did. But what happened next? That unexpected appearance in Thomas's hospital room would send shockwaves through Montecito and push Harry even closer to a line he swore he'd never cross. The door creaked open slowly. The room was dim, sterile, lit by the pale blue glow of heart monitors and 4 machines humming steadily. Thomas Markle stirred in his hospital bed, weak but conscious, as a figure entered the room, quietly, cautiously. It wasn't Meghan. It wasn't Harry. It was Samantha Markle, Thomas's other daughter, the one Meghan sued for defamation, the one she refused to even name during interviews, the one she accused of exploiting her rise to royalty. The half-sister who became a headline, a legal enemy, a nemesis, and now, a witness to a man's final chapter. Samantha wasn't there for drama. Not this time. She was there because Thomas had asked for her. Despite years of public feuding, Samantha had flown in, immediately, when she heard the news. No hesitation. No media circus. Just a sister answering a father's call. She sat by the bed, reached for his hand, and whispered through tears, "I'm here, Daddy." And then she opened her bag. Not with medicine. Not with flowers. With documents. According to hospital staff, Samantha presented something Thomas had kept hidden for years. Handwritten letters, unseen photos, voicemails. All from Meghan. All dated before the wedding fallout. And they told a story no one expected. One letter, dated just months before the royal wedding, revealed Meghan expressing concern for her father's health and asking him to stay off the radar until after the ceremony. A second letter thanked him for his financial support during her acting years. A third letter? It referenced the very paparazzi photos that would later spark their rupture, but framed with far more sympathy than previously portrayed. If this evidence reached the public, it would paint a very different picture. Not of a cruel father exploiting his daughter, but of a desperate man trying and failing to stay relevant in her new, glittering world. And here's the twist. Samantha didn't threaten to release them. She warned Meghan. Because in that hospital room, as Thomas clutched his remaining leg in pain, Samantha made a decision. If Meghan refused to call, then the truth would speak for her. Hospital staff overheard the plan. A nurse allegedly leaked the conversation. And within 24 hours, the British tabloids had the scent. Suddenly, the narrative flipped again. No longer was Thomas just the disowned dad. He was now a man with receipts. A man who hadn't always been the villain. And Meghan? Her silence began to look less like protection and more like fear. But fear of what? Embarrassment? Exposure? Loss of control? Or something deeper? Something she hasn't admitted even to herself? That maybe, just maybe, she's built her castle on a shaky foundation of selective memory, PR reshaping, and emotional distancing. And if Thomas's side of the story came out, that castle could crack. Meghan's defenders were quick to counter. She's a victim of emotional abuse, they said. She's setting boundaries. She doesn't owe him anything. And those arguments held weight, at first. But then came a brutal reality check. Thomas's doctor spoke out. In a rare interview, the attending surgeon confirmed just how close the operation had come to failure. We nearly lost him on the table, he said bluntly. His vitals dropped mid-surgery. We had to act fast. He paused, then added, the stress certainly didn't help. And with that line, the implication hung in the air. The stress of abandonment. The pain of being publicly erased. The heartbreak of silence from a daughter he once adored. Now here's where it gets almost surreal. In the middle of this media storm, while Samantha was leaking letters and the press was circling, Meghan made her next move. She went shopping. Paparazzi snapped her smiling in a $4,000 designer coat, exiting a Montecito boutique, coffee in hand, sunglasses perched like armor. Not a hospital, not a call center, not a therapy session, a boutique. The backlash was instant. She has time to buy handbags, but not call her dying dad. She's building a lifestyle brand on self-love while ignoring basic human love. Compassion is selective now. Twitter exploded. TikTok dissected her facial expressions. Reddit threads tore into the contradictions. And quietly, behind all of it, Harry was breaking. Because whether he wanted to admit it or not, he was now the bridge between two collapsing worlds. His wife, entrenched in silence, and his father-in-law, fading away. And the pressure was getting to him. According to multiple insiders, Harry began making inquiries, secretly, about visiting Thomas in person. Not with Meghan, not with cameras, alone. His team allegedly explored logistics for a low-profile trip to the Philippines. The goal? To give Thomas a final moment of peace. And perhaps closure. But when Meghan got wind of it, all hell broke loose. She saw it as betrayal, one source said. She told him, if you go, don't come back. Let that settle. A woman who claims to value family above all else told her husband to choose. And for the first time, Harry hesitated. Because maybe he was finally asking himself what the public has been asking for years. Is loyalty to your spouse supposed to mean abandoning everyone else? Is emotional protection supposed to come at the cost of basic humanity? And most haunting of all, what kind of future are we building for our children if we can't even face the past? Because Thomas Markle isn't just a tabloid character. He's a man, a father, a grandfather, and time is running out. Doctors now say his condition remains fragile. The clot in his thigh is stable for now, but the risk of full-body infection remains high. Another amputation may be necessary. Sepsis is still a looming threat, and with every passing hour, the silence from Montecito grows more deafening. Meghan has made her choice, at least for now. But Harry? He's at the crossroads, and what he does next could shatter everything. Because the pressure isn't just coming from the outside anymore. It's coming from inside their own marriage. And as Meghan doubles down on silence, someone else is about to speak, and their words will shake the entire royal universe. What happens when the man who walked away from a crown threatens to walk away from his wife? That's the question now reverberating through the halls of Montecito. Because Prince Harry, once the fiercely loyal protector of Meghan Markle, the man who went to war with the British media, the monarchy, and even his own family for her, has finally drawn a line. And the woman he once vowed to shield from every headline, every critic, every paparazzi lens, is now standing on the other side of it. This isn't just a marriage at a crossroads. This is an ultimatum, a royal one. According to close insiders, Prince Harry delivered a searing message behind closed doors, a line in the sand that shook the walls of their $14 million Montecito mansion. Call your father, or I will. And this time, I won't protect you from what comes next. Let that sentence echo, because in that moment, Harry didn't sound like the Duke of Sussex. He didn't sound like the husband, the ally, the protector. He sounded like a man, fed up, heartbroken, and on the edge. And for Meghan, that edge has never felt closer. So how did we get here? Let's rewind just 72 hours. Because the escalation didn't come from nowhere. Thomas Markle's emergency surgery had just ended. His leg, amputated below the knee. His body weak. Infection risks still dangerously high. The media had picked up the story like wildfire. Photos of the hospital. Statements from Thomas Jr., emotional pleas from Samantha. Leaked letters. Medical briefings. It was the kind of chaos Harry despised. But this time, it wasn't his family causing it. It was Meghan's silence. And that's what changed everything. Insiders say Harry watched the press swirl, watched the world turn cold, watched Meghan smile through it all, hosting meetings, preparing for brand launches. And something inside him snapped. This wasn't the Meghan he met in 2016. This wasn't the woman who cried over rescue dogs, who wrote letters to strangers, who quoted Maya Angelou and lit candles for victims halfway across the globe. This was someone else. Someone hardened. Someone unreachable. And that's when he confronted her. In their living room, with security locked out and aides dismissed, Harry reportedly told Meghan everything he'd been bottling up for months. You talk about kindness, he said. You talk about compassion. But where is it? Right now? Where is it? Meghan didn't answer. According to one source, she just looked at him, calm, composed, stone-faced. I'm not going to reward his behavior, she finally said. That phrase, reward his behavior, that's what did it. Because to Harry, this wasn't about rewards or punishments. This was about death, family, regret, and basic human decency. He reportedly raised his voice, louder than he ever had in their home. He's your father. Meghan fired back. He's a liar. He's dangerous. But Harry wouldn't let it go. You think the world's going to understand this? You think they're going to back you forever while your father dies in a hospital bed and you say nothing? Still, Meghan held her ground. He made his choice, she snapped. And that's when Harry made his. If you don't call him, I will. That wasn't a suggestion. It was a threat. But it didn't stop there. Because Harry, frustrated and raw, didn't just threaten to reach out. He threatened to go further. He reportedly told her, I'll take the kids. I'll go see him myself. Archie and Lilibet deserve to meet their grandfather before it's too late. And if that's not something you can live with, fine. The silence that followed was brutal. The temperature in the room dropped. It wasn't about the phone call anymore. It was about control. Harry, for the first time in their relationship, was seizing it back. And Meghan? She wasn't ready for that. She accused him of betrayal. How dare you threaten me with that? She reportedly said. You're siding with them. Harry, stunned, responded with something few expected. No, I'm siding with what's right. That moment, tense, emotional, irreversible, was the beginning of what some insiders are calling the Montecito Rift. Because everything changed after that night. Meghan allegedly stopped speaking to Harry for over 24 hours. She moved into the guest wing. Staff were told not to disturb her. Security reported an icy atmosphere. Meals were taken separately. And Harry? He made phone calls. We don't know who exactly he contacted, but we do know a few names started circulating in the hours that followed. A private pilot based in Santa Barbara. A medical liaison with ties to a hospital in the Philippines. A British journalist known for royal coverage, and for once being sympathetic to Harry. Was he planning a trip? Was he leaking the story himself? Was he preparing to flip the narrative? Whatever he was doing, Meghan knew one thing. She was losing control of him. And that realization sent her spiraling. Because for 5 years, Harry had been her shield. From the tabloids, from the palace, from public opinion. But now, he was becoming something else. Not an enemy, but not an ally either. A wild card. And Meghan doesn't do wild cards. Especially when her entire public image, her brands, her deals, her upcoming projects hinge on a single idea. That she is morally right. That she is principled. That she is better than the royal system that hurt her. But this hospital scandal, this silence, this defiance, it's revealing a different side, a colder side. And Harry, finally, can't ignore it. But here's where it gets even more dramatic. Because just as the internal rift between Meghan and Harry reached its boiling point, a letter arrived. Not from Thomas, not from Samantha, not from the press, but from someone unexpected, someone in London. And what was inside? Let's just say this. It wasn't a warning. It was a reminder. A reminder of something Harry had once said to Meghan, years ago, about never becoming like them. And the line at the bottom? A quote from Princess Diana. Family is the most important thing in the world. Who sent it? No signature. No return address. But Harry recognized the handwriting instantly. And when Meghan found out, she burned it. That letter. And signed, but unmistakably familiar, never made it to the recycling bin. Meghan, upon discovering Harry holding it in the kitchen, allegedly snatched it from his hands, stormed out to their private courtyard, and lit a match. Gone in seconds, but not forgotten. Because for Harry, the real burn wasn't the fire, it was the message, the quote from his mother. The handwriting he knew belonged to a family confidant. A reminder that the values Diana raised him with, empathy, connection, humanity, were being trampled in real time. Not by the crown, not by the press, but by the very woman he thought he'd found sanctuary with. And as the ashes floated into the California sky, Harry saw something else go up in smoke. His belief that Meghan could still change her mind. He had hoped, naively perhaps, that confronting her would jolt something loose. That the image of Thomas, legless, pale, maybe dying, would break through the emotional dam. That she'd soften. That she'd call. But she hadn't. And now, she was doubling down. Not only had Meghan refused to speak with her father, she now made it clear she wouldn't allow Harry to either. That was the next line drawn. According to palace-adjacent sources, Meghan told Harry plainly, "If you go to see him, you'll do it without me. And don't expect to come back." A cold, stunning threat. The kind that draws gasps when whispered in circles of power. For a woman who once said, "I lost my father," this was now a different language. She was prepared to lose Harry, too, to keep her boundary intact. But here's where it gets even more brutal. Because that same night, Harry received a second call. From Samantha Markle. It was unexpected. He hadn't spoken to her in years, if ever. But Thomas's condition had worsened. The clot in his thigh was spreading. He was in danger of losing the entire leg. His oxygen levels had dipped. The words systemic shock and sepsis risk were whispered by ICU nurses. The prognosis was changing by the hour. Samantha didn't beg. She didn't plead. She just said 6 words. Your kids deserve to know him. And Harry knew she was right. Even if it came from the one woman Meghan considered a mortal enemy. Because now, it wasn't about photos. It wasn't about staged tabloid deals. It wasn't about 2018. It was about children. Archie and Lilibet. 2 innocent lives who had never seen the face of their maternal grandfather. Never heard his voice. Never sat on his lap. Never made a memory. And here he was about to vanish from the world. Possibly in days. Harry didn't sleep that night. He walked the halls of the Montecito mansion like a ghost. Staff reported hearing footsteps in the hallway at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4:30. Lights on, lights off, doors opening and closing. And Meghan? Still silent, still withdrawn, still locked in her wing of the estate. That was when Harry, in desperation, called someone else. Someone from his past. Someone unexpected. A former private secretary from his palace years. A man who'd helped him navigate royal duty, who'd once smuggled him out of clubs to avoid paparazzi, who knew the ins and outs of discretion. He asked one thing. How fast can you get me there without anyone knowing? And that's when plans quietly began to form. A discreet charter. A rerouted flight path. A medical liaison in Cebu. A plan to get in, see Thomas, and get out without triggering international headlines. But news travels fast in royal circles. And somehow, Meghan found out. Whether through Harry's phone, a tipped-off staffer, or her own network, it didn't matter. The result was the same. She confronted him. Not with tears. Not with a hug. Not with a conversation. With cold fury. According to a member of their inner team, Meghan stood at the top of the stairs and said, flatly, "If you go, take your things with you." Harry, stunned, didn't speak. And that was when she said the words that would define their rift. "I won't be part of another circus." Another circus. That's how she sees it. Not a dying father. Not a last goodbye. Not a desperate man with one leg begging for reconciliation. A circus. That's when Harry made his final decision. He didn't shout. He didn't fight. He didn't beg. He simply walked into his office, pulled out his passport, and started packing a bag. But then, before he could finish, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. International code. He answered. And on the other end, a voice he hadn't heard in years. A British journalist. One who had been tracking Meghan's silence. One who had sources in the Philippines. One who had just received something from a nurse at the hospital. A voice memo. Thomas Markle. Weak. Raspy. Barely audible. But clear enough to hear him say one sentence. "I don't want to die without hearing her voice." That was it. Not an attack. Not a manipulation. Not a publicity stunt. A dying man asking for his daughter. And Harry? He broke. Right there. Collapsed in his chair. Head in hands. Because no matter how much he wanted to fix it, to mediate it, to protect everyone, there was no fixing this. Not anymore. Meghan wasn't going to call. Thomas might not survive. And Harry was about to become the man stuck in the middle of history's most uncomfortable question. What do you do when your wife refuses to forgive, and your children lose a grandparent they never met? But what came next would change everything. Because just as Harry sat in that chair, memos still echoing in his ears, a knock came at the door, and standing there wasn't a member of staff. It wasn't Meghan. It wasn't security. It was someone from Meghan's past. And they had a message. Not for Harry. For her. And that message would expose a secret Meghan thought she'd buried forever. What happens when time runs out and no one is ready? Because that's exactly what began unfolding in a quiet hospital room in Cebu, Philippines, while Meghan Markle remained silent in California and Prince Harry stared down the ultimate dilemma: break his family or break his soul. The knock at the door had startled him. Harry hadn't expected anyone, not after the tension of the past 48 hours. Not after the voice memo. Not after the fight. He thought he was alone in this now. But standing there, framed by the mahogany door of his private study, was someone he never imagined would resurface. Genevieve Roth. The name might not ring bells to the public, but in Meghan's world, she was once everything. An advisor, a confidant, a media strategist during the couple's early post-royal life. She had helped craft narratives, pin blog entries, draft charitable messaging for the Archwell Foundation, and then, quietly, disappeared. There had been no public fallout, no drama, just silence. Until now. She stepped into the room, composed, almost ghost-like. "I wasn't supposed to come," she said, "but I saw the headlines. I spoke to someone in Cebu, and I couldn't sit still." Harry stood, half in shock, half in suspicion. Genevieve didn't waste time. She scared Harry. "But this isn't just about Thomas. There's something she hasn't told you." And just like that, the race against death wasn't just literal anymore. It was emotional, moral, spiritual. Because if Genevieve was right, then Meghan's silence wasn't just callous, it was calculated. Protective. Maybe even shameful. "She's protecting something," Genevieve said. And it started long before the wedding. Before the paparazzi. Before the staged photos. This goes back to LA. To 2011. To something that happened when she thought no one was watching. Harry's blood went cold. "What are you talking about?" Genevieve hesitated. She made a choice years ago. Something involving Thomas. Something she regrets. Something she's terrified you'll find out about now. And if she calls him, it might come out. But before she could continue, Harry's phone rang. Again. It was Samantha. This time, her voice was trembling. "It's bad," she said. "Dad's pressure dropped. The doctors are trying to stabilize him. They're calling it septic shock. They've got him on oxygen. They don't know if he'll last the night." The room spun. Harry barely heard Genevieve behind him as he muttered, "I need to get on that plane." And here began the race. Because what had once been a moral crisis was now a countdown. The doctors had given Thomas 24 hours. 24 hours to stabilize. 24 hours before the infection could spread to his heart. 24 hours before death became inevitable. Meghan didn't know. Or maybe she did, and didn't care. That was the question Harry couldn't shake. Because even now, she hadn't come downstairs. Even now, she hadn't asked about her father. Even now, after burning a letter from Diana's old friend and listening to her husband pack a bag to see a dying man, she said nothing. And Harry? He moved fast. The chartered plane had been arranged quietly. The staff, sworn to India-level secrecy, were told the flight was for philanthropic reasons. The route would go from Santa Barbara to Guam, and then to Cebu. Estimated arrival, 18 hours. But Harry knew it could be too late. Because Thomas had already begun to fade. According to Samantha, the nurses had to resuscitate him at least once. His fever was spiking. His kidneys were struggling. And the stump of his amputated leg had started to show signs of inflammation, redness, swelling, a bad sign. They were prepping antibiotics, steroids, more surgery if he survived the night. And still, no word from Meghan. But here's the cruel twist. Because even as Harry scrambled to get to the airport, Meghan made her next move. And it shocked everyone. Not a phone call, not a letter, but a press release. Drafted carefully, sent through Archwell channels, reviewed by lawyers. It read, "At this time, the Duchess of Sussex has no comment regarding recent reports concerning her estranged family. We ask for privacy during this personal period. No warmth, no acknowledgement, no empathy, just a corporate firewall." It landed like a brick across the world. Even normally Meghan-friendly outlets like People and ET began to blink. "She's not even pretending to care?" asked one late-night host. "Is this how a daughter responds to her father dying?" Social media blew up again. The hashtags trended instantly. Hashtag call your dad. Hashtag Duchess of Silence. Hashtag Meghan the mute. But Harry? He said nothing. He boarded the plane. He turned off his phone. And he stared out the window as the California coast vanished below. What was he thinking in that moment? Was he angry? Defeated? Terrified? All we know is this. He was flying toward a man he'd never hugged. A man who'd been turned into a villain in every paper. A man who had only ever existed in his life through headlines and interviews and secondhand emotion. But now, Thomas was human, mortal, dying, and Harry was the only one coming. And as the engines roared and the sun began to rise, something else was rising behind the walls of Montecito. Meghan's panic. Because for the first time in years, she wasn't in control of the story. Harry was. And what he'd do next, no one, not even Meghan, could predict. Meghan Markle didn't cry. Not when Harry left. Not when the door closed. Not when the sound of the car disappeared down the long Montecito driveway. She didn't yell, didn't chase, didn't beg him to stay. She simply watched him go, expressionless, arms folded, lips tight. But behind her eyes, something had cracked. Because for the first time since stepping into royal life, Meghan was no longer the storyteller. She was the subject. And the man who once protected her from every headline, every critic, every scandal, had stepped out of frame. While Harry's plane crossed the Pacific, a different kind of storm began forming in California. One made of whispers, suspicion, and quiet dread. Inside the house, staff said the energy shifted. Rooms felt colder. Lights stayed dimmed. Doria Ragland, Meghan's mother, reportedly arrived late that afternoon and immediately asked to speak with her daughter in private. No one knows what was said behind that closed door, but sources claim voices were raised. One housekeeper told a friend, "It was the first time I ever heard Doria sound angry." And how could she not be? Her ex-husband was dying. Her daughter was silent. Her son-in-law had vanished into the clouds. And worst of all, news was about to break. Because across the world, in Cebu, Thomas Markle was deteriorating faster than expected. Doctors confirmed that despite aggressive antibiotic therapy, the infection in his thigh was spreading. His blood pressure had dropped again. His breathing became shallow. Nurses noted rapid systemic decline in their overnight logs. At 2:42 a.m. local time, the hospital issued a red alert. Code blue. Thomas's heart stopped. He was resuscitated after 37 seconds of chest compressions and one shot of epinephrine. He came back, but barely. His eyes fluttered. He spoke one word. "Meg." And then he fell unconscious again. He was placed on a ventilator. And the clock reset. Harry's flight was still 11 hours out, and no one knew if Thomas would make it. But here's the cruel twist. The moment the resuscitation report leaked to the international press, everyone knew. The hospital was forced to confirm that Thomas Markle had suffered a temporary cardiac event in the early morning hours. Within minutes, it was global news. CNN, BBC, TMZ, the Daily Mail, Le Monde, every outlet, every language, every corner of the digital world, carrying the same brutal headline. Meghan Markle's father suffers cardiac episode amid silent estrangement. And in Montecito? Panic. Meghan's PR team went into damage control mode instantly. Calls were made. Lawyers briefed. Crisis teams activated. Social media interns scrubbed scheduled posts. Charity photo ops were canceled. This wasn't just bad optics. This was a full-blown moral implosion. But still, she said nothing. And the silence grew louder. Meanwhile, in the sky, Harry received word mid-flight. The pilot, after speaking with ground staff in Guam, relayed the emergency via a secure communication channel. Your father-in-law coded. They brought him back. He's critical. Harry didn't speak. He just nodded. The cabin was quiet. No aides. No cameras. No distractions. Just a man, racing toward the last breaths of a stranger he once called the other side of the story. What was he feeling? Rage at Meghan? Guilt for not acting sooner? Grief for a family he never really knew? Whatever it was, it hit hard. Because Harry reportedly spent the next 2 hours in silence, staring at old photos on his phone, pictures of Meghan as a child, birthday parties, Halloween costumes, a graduation ceremony. Thomas always smiling in the background. He was there. And now, he was disappearing. But then something unexpected happened. Halfway through the Pacific, Harry's phone buzzed. It shouldn't have. He'd turned off all alerts. But one message had broken through. A voicemail. From Meghan. He played it once. Then again. Then a third time. The voice was calm. Careful. Almost rehearsed. I'm sorry. I know this is hard. I just can't do this right now. Please don't let them manipulate you. You know what he did. You know what he could do. I can't go back there. I hope you understand. She ended with 3 words. I love you. But Harry didn't feel loved in that moment. He felt trapped. Because what was she asking? Not for compassion. Not for forgiveness. But for loyalty. Unquestioned, blind, and absolute. Even if it meant turning away from a man with tubes in his throat and monitors screaming into the silence. Harry didn't respond. He stared out the window as the stars began to vanish into a misty horizon. The sun was rising over the Philippines. Time was up. By the time the plane touched down in Cebu, Thomas had been moved to a more intensive unit. His condition? Still critical. Still unconscious. But alive. Harry entered the hospital through a back entrance. No press. No staff. Just him and one medical escort. He walked down a long, dim hallway. Past the surgical wing. Past the amputation unit. Past the wall of prayers pinned by desperate families. And then he stood outside room 317. His hand trembled on the door. He'd never met the man inside. Not once. Not at the wedding. Not at Archie's birth. Not at any moment in the 5 years he had been married to Meghan Markle. And now here he was. Alone. A prince of the United Kingdom, facing a father America had written off. He stepped in. And for the first time in his life, Harry looked Thomas Markle in the face. He was pale. Sunken. Tubes snaked across his face. A ventilator hissed quietly. His left leg gone. His body frail. But he was still Thomas. Still her father. Harry didn't speak for several minutes. He just stood there, watching, breathing, processing. And then he sat down. He reached for Thomas's hand. It was warm. And slowly, gently, Thomas opened his eyes. They locked for the briefest second. And in a raspy, breathless whisper, Thomas said, "You came." Harry nodded. Neither man cried. There were no grand speeches. No dramatic reconciliations. No press-ready apologies. Just 2 broken men, facing the wreckage between them. And for the first time, silence meant something else. It meant peace. But what neither man knew, at that exact moment, in California, Meghan was making a final call. Not to Thomas. To her lawyers. Because what she'd just discovered, through a leak, a name, a photo, would set off a new kind of race. One that would put Harry in an impossible position. Because someone close, had betrayed her. And what they revealed, would blow open a scandal far bigger than a dying father. What kind of silence is louder than screaming? The kind that comes from a daughter who refuses to lift a phone while her father lies in a hospital bed, minus a leg, hooked to machines, drifting in and out of pain so heavy it shakes the room. The kind that isn't accidental or delayed or complicated. The kind that is deliberate. And that is exactly the silence Meghan Markle kept. Even as headlines exploded. Even as doctors warned of sepsis. Even as her father's remaining leg risked collapse. Even as Harry begged her to reconsider. She didn't budge. But why? Why does Meghan Markle, global humanitarian, advocate for compassion, champion of mental health, maintain such a cold, impenetrable wall against her own father? That is the question everyone began asking the moment Thomas Markle's amputation story went public. And the answers? They're messy, contradictory, raw, and emotionally explosive. Let's go back. Because to understand Meghan's refusal to reach out now, in a moment of true crisis, you must understand the resentment she's been dragging behind her like a dead weight since 2018. The wedding that changed it all. Her father wasn't there. Her father didn't walk her down the aisle. Her father didn't hold her hand as she stepped into global royalty. Instead, he was in a hospital, recovering from emergency heart surgery, humiliated by the paparazzi scandal he'd fallen into just days earlier. The fallout was catastrophic. Meghan felt betrayed. Thomas felt cornered. And the British tabloids? They feasted. This is where the first brick in the wall was laid. Thomas, in a moment of misguided pride and naive hope, staged photos with paparazzi to appear healthier, more dignified, more fatherly before the wedding. He wanted to look worthy in front of the world. He wanted Meghan to be proud. But when the ruse was exposed, Meghan felt humiliated. She felt used. She felt manipulated. And so began the freeze-out. But here's the contradiction that still haunts the public discourse. How do you freeze out the man who raised you, supported you, funded your education, paid your acting classes, and carried your childhood dreams on his back? How do you erase a father? How do you cut him out of your life entirely, as if he never existed? People fall out with their parents every day. But most don't go years, without a single word. Most don't marry, have children, build new lives across the world, and still refuse to reconnect, even when death circles overhead. And that is exactly what Meghan is doing now. But the strange twist is this. While Meghan has spent years defending her decision to distance herself, claiming trauma and betrayal, she's also built a public image around compassion. She speaks about reconciliation, healing, forgiveness. She's written about the pain of family wounds. She's cried on camera about generational trauma and the need to break cycles. And yet, she's doing none of that now. That contradiction is what fueled the firestorm surrounding her silence. Because while the world was digesting the shocking news of Thomas's amputation, they were also watching Meghan launch new brands, appear in sleek photo shoots, sign multi-million-dollar deals, and speak about empathy. Empathy for strangers. Empathy for survivors. Empathy for causes. But not empathy for her father. Not even when he whispered her name through tears. Not even when doctors warned he could die within days. Not even when a clot in his thigh threatened to take the rest of his leg. Not even now. But here's where the story takes a darker, more revealing turn. Because while Meghan's silence seemed cold on the surface, what was happening behind the scenes was even colder. According to a former aide, the Sussex PR team was monitoring reactions, headlines, sentiment analytics, social media trends, calculating how Meghan should position herself in response. Not emotionally, not morally, strategically. The question wasn't, should I call my dad? The question was, what do we say if people turn against me? Let that sink in. This wasn't about a father. It was about optics. And if that seems harsh, consider this. The same day the news of the amputation broke, Meghan's team reportedly held a scheduled brand meeting for her lifestyle project. Not a crisis meeting, not a family meeting, a branding meeting. While Thomas's son was pacing the ICU hallway, Meghan was allegedly reviewing packaging designs. Does that make her a villain? A monster? Not necessarily. People cope in strange ways. Trauma twists logic. Walls built from pain don't crumble easily. But here's the emotional gut punch. Even people in Meghan's own circle were shocked she didn't reach out. One friend reportedly said, "Even if you never speak again, you call a dying parent." It's what humans do. Yet Meghan didn't. And each hour she stayed silent made Harry angrier. Because Harry, who has spent years fighting for his wife's emotional safety, now saw a situation where the pain was coming from her.